The tension inside the Privy Council chamber was impossible to ignore. What began as a routine discussion about royal heirlooms reportedly spiraled into one of the most explosive disagreements the palace had faced in years. Courtiers were said to be stunned as Princess Catherine emerged visibly determined, refusing to yield on a matter that touched far more than jewels. At the center of the storm stood a legendary tiara, a cherished legacy, and a battle over who truly safeguards Diana's memory. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, the whispers seemed too extraordinary to believe. According to reports circulating among royal observers, the discussion had been intended as a quiet administrative review of historic royal treasures and their future ceremonial use. These meetings rarely attract public attention. They are often viewed as routine matters of protocol, tradition, and stewardship. Yet this particular conversation reportedly unfolded very differently. Sources familiar with palace operations suggest that questions emerged regarding access to several pieces long associated with Princess Diana. While no official details were ever released, insiders allegedly claim that one particular tiara quickly became the focal point of an increasingly sensitive debate. What began as a procedural matter reportedly evolved into something far more emotional and far more significant. For Catherine, the issue was never simply about diamonds, pearls, or precious stones. Those who follow the royal family closely have often noted her deep awareness of symbolism and continuity. Reports suggest she viewed the discussion through an entirely different lens. To her, these historic pieces represented a living connection between generations of royal women, carrying stories, sacrifices, and responsibilities that extended far beyond their material value. As the conversation progressed, palace insiders claim the atmosphere became noticeably strained. Senior aides reportedly exchanged uneasy glances, while advisors carefully weighed every word being spoken. What made the situation particularly delicate was the fact that Diana's legacy remains one of the most powerful emotional forces within modern royal history. Any discussion touching that legacy inevitably carries consequences that extend far beyond palace walls. The alleged disagreement soon expanded into broader questions about inheritance, stewardship, and the future identity of the monarchy itself. Who should guide the meaning of these treasured symbols? Who carries the responsibility of protecting their historical significance? And perhaps most importantly, who ensures that future generations understand what those symbols truly represent? According to various reports, Catherine's position remained remarkably firm throughout the discussions. Palace sources suggest she viewed herself not as an owner of royal history, but as its guardian. That distinction may seem subtle, but within royal circles it carries enormous significance. Guardians preserve, owners possess, and the difference between those two ideas would reportedly become the defining issue at the heart of the conflict. Meanwhile, speculation began spreading quietly through royal circles. The more people heard about the disagreement, the more it appeared that the controversy was not isolated to a single meeting or a single decision. Instead, it seemed to reflect a deeper struggle over how the monarchy would balance tradition with changing relationships inside the House of Windsor. Some insiders even suggested that the debate revealed tensions that had existed beneath the surface for quite some time. Questions that had remained unspoken were suddenly impossible to ignore. Questions about legacy, questions about influence, questions about who would ultimately shape the royal narrative for decades to come. And as those questions grew louder, one realization became increasingly difficult to dismiss. The dispute had never truly been about a piece of jewelry resting inside a royal vault. It represented something much larger, something far more consequential for the future of the crown. But the dispute was never really about a tiara, it was about who would shape the future meaning of Diana's legacy inside the House of Windsor. Long before the latest controversy, Diana's most famous jewels had acquired a significance far beyond their diamonds and gemstones. They became symbols of continuity, memory, and public affection. To millions, these treasures represented a chapter of royal history that could never be replicated. That is why whispers of changes surrounding their future handling reportedly sparked immediate concern among those who viewed the collection as part of a sacred royal inheritance. The debate unfolding behind palace walls carried weight because Diana's jewelry was never viewed as an ordinary collection. Over the years, each piece became connected to moments that shaped public perceptions of the monarchy itself. They survived, changing generations, shifting public sentiment, and some of the most turbulent periods in royal history. What remained constant was the emotional connection people felt whenever Diana's legacy entered the conversation. That emotional connection is precisely why reports of the Privy Council disagreement spread so quickly among royal watchers. Many observers believed the discussion touched something far deeper than protocol. These jewels were not merely historical artifacts resting inside royal vaults. They had become reminders of sacrifice, resilience, and a royal figure whose influence seemed to grow rather than fade with time. For years, Catherine has often found herself linked to that legacy, not because she attempted to replace Diana, but because many viewed her as carrying forward certain values that Diana represented. Grace under pressure, commitment to duty, a careful understanding of the public's emotional relationship with the crown. Those qualities reportedly shaped Catherine's perspective as discussions surrounding the jewels became increasingly sensitive. According to palace insiders, the debate was never framed around personal possession. The question reportedly focused on ceremonial use and future stewardship. Yet that distinction made the situation even more complicated. Ownership can be defined through documents and legal agreements. Stewardship is different. Stewardship involves responsibility. It involves trust. And trust, especially within royal circles, can become one of the most fiercely protected forms of power. As conversations continued, historians and royal commentators allegedly began expressing concern about the precedent any decision might create. If the handling of Diana-associated treasures changed significantly, what message would that send about the preservation of royal history? What would future generations inherit not just physically, but symbolically? Those questions quietly transformed the discussion into something much larger than anyone anticipated. The controversy stopped being about individual jewels and became a debate about the principles guiding the monarchy during a period of profound transition. Behind every argument about tradition stood another question waiting to be answered. Who gets to define that tradition moving forward? The deeper palace circles reportedly examined the issue. The more underlying tensions seemed to emerge. Different visions for safeguarding royal heritage began colliding. Different interpretations of responsibility surfaced. And with every passing day, speculation intensified about the powerful figures whose influence might ultimately determine the outcome. As concerns grew, attention shifted from the jewels themselves to the individuals believed to be influencing decisions behind palace walls. For years, reports have suggested that differing visions for the monarchy existed beneath the surface of royal unity. Most disagreements remained private, managed through protocol and discretion. Yet, insiders now whisper that the question of Diana's tiara exposed those divisions more clearly than ever before. What appeared to be a ceremonial discussion soon became a clash between competing ideas of legacy, influence, and responsibility. The deeper palace observers looked into the controversy, the more they began to realize that the dispute was merely the latest chapter in a much larger story. Royal institutions have always depended on a delicate balance between tradition and adaptation. That balance often remains invisible to the public. But, according to various interpretations circulating among royal commentators, the disagreements surrounding Diana's legacy brought long-standing differences into unusually sharp focus. At the heart of the issue were two contrasting philosophies. One perspective reportedly emphasized preservation above all else. Those who supported this view believed that certain symbols carried such historical significance that they should be handled with extraordinary care. For them, continuity was not simply a preference. It was a duty, a responsibility owed not only to the monarchy, but also to the generations who would inherit its traditions. Many insiders claim Catherine found herself closely associated with that position. Throughout the years, she had often been viewed as a figure who respected the institution's history while preparing for its future. Reports suggest that her concerns extended beyond a single ceremonial decision. Instead, she allegedly saw the debate as part of a larger question. How does the monarchy protect the meaning of its most treasured symbols while navigating a rapidly changing era? Yet others reportedly viewed the matter differently. Supporters of a more flexible approach allegedly argued that traditions must evolve alongside the institution itself. According to Palace Whispers, they believed ceremonial practices should retain room for adaptation rather than remain permanently fixed. To them, the discussion was less about protecting the past and more about ensuring the monarchy remained relevant in the future. That difference in perspective created an increasingly delicate situation for palace officials. Advisors, administrators, and senior courtiers reportedly found themselves navigating exceptionally sensitive territory. Every conversation carried potential consequences. Every decision risked being interpreted as support for one vision over another. And in an institution built upon stability, even the perception of division can become a source of concern. As speculation spread, the controversy gradually transformed into something larger than the tiara itself. It became a symbol of broader tensions quietly emerging within the royal household. Questions of stewardship became questions of authority. Questions of ceremony became questions of influence. And with every new rumor, public curiosity intensified. Perhaps most concerning for senior figures was the possibility that these disagreements might become visible beyond palace walls. Reports suggest there was growing anxiety about how such divisions would be perceived if they entered the public conversation. After all, the monarchy has long relied upon the image of unity, particularly during periods of transition and uncertainty. But as concerns mounted and positions hardened, an even more profound question began resurfacing among those closest to the debate. It was a question no policy document could answer and no advisor could easily resolve. And as the debate intensified, one historic concern reportedly resurfaced: what would Diana herself have wanted? Even decades after her passing, Diana's presence continues to shape conversations throughout the monarchy. Her image, her legacy, and the public affection surrounding her remain powerful forces. Sources familiar with royal history suggest that any discussion involving her personal treasures inevitably carries emotional weight. That reality reportedly transformed a private disagreement into something far larger than anyone initially expected. What made the situation so sensitive was the simple fact that Diana's influence never truly disappeared. Time moved forward. Monarchs changed. Generations matured. Yet public fascination with Diana endured with remarkable strength. Few figures in modern royal history have maintained such a profound connection with people long after their passing. For millions, she remains more than a historical figure. She represents an enduring idea of compassion, sacrifice, and humanity within an institution often defined by tradition and restraint. Because of that, every object associated with her carries extraordinary significance. Her jewelry, in particular, occupies a unique place in the public imagination. These pieces are not viewed merely as royal accessories. They are often regarded as extensions of her story, preserving memories that continue to resonate decades later. Reports suggest that this emotional reality hovered over every discussion connected to the tiara controversy, making compromise increasingly difficult. As palace conversations continued, Diana's name reportedly surfaced again and again, not necessarily in direct debate, but as an unspoken presence influencing every argument. According to insiders, many participants understood that any decision involving her legacy would inevitably be measured against public sentiment. That awareness created pressure from all directions. A decision that appeared practical within palace walls could easily be interpreted very differently beyond them. For Catherine, the connection carried additional significance. Over the years, many royal observers have viewed her as one of the most visible links between the monarchy's future and Diana's enduring legacy. Whether fairly or unfairly, comparisons have followed her throughout much of her royal journey. Reports suggest that this reality may have strengthened her determination during the discussions. To supporters, her position reflected a desire to preserve something larger than tradition alone. It reflected a commitment to protecting a legacy that continues to hold immense emotional meaning. Meanwhile, palace advisors allegedly became increasingly concerned about public perception. They reportedly understood that even minor changes involving Diana-associated treasures could trigger widespread scrutiny. The monarchy had spent years carefully managing historical sensitivities. Now, according to royal commentators, those sensitivities were resurfacing with unexpected force. The challenge was that every proposed solution seemed to carry its own complications. Decisions that satisfied one side risked disappointing another. Historical precedent, family dynamics, institutional responsibility, and public expectations became intertwined. What should have been a straightforward discussion evolved into a maze of competing pressures with no obvious path forward. As tensions deepened, it became increasingly clear that emotions alone could not explain the intensity of the dispute. Diana's legacy may have provided the spark, but something else was driving the conflict beneath the surface. Questions of memory had become questions of power. Questions of stewardship had become questions of control. Yet, while emotions shaped the debate, the real struggle centered on authority and who ultimately had the right to decide. According to persistent palace whispers, there comes a moment in every royal dispute when compromise gives way to conviction. Insiders claim this was that moment. What had begun as a careful discussion reportedly evolved into a firm defense of principle. Catherine was said to view the issue not as a question of preference, but as a responsibility tied to future generations of the monarchy. As the debate continued behind closed doors, reports suggest Catherine's position became increasingly clear. What some initially viewed as a disagreement over ceremonial arrangements was, in her eyes, something much larger. Palace insiders allegedly claim she framed the entire matter around a single concept: guardianship. The jewels, the traditions, and the stories attached to them were not possessions to be distributed according to convenience. They were responsibilities entrusted to each generation, carried forward with care, and passed onward with their meaning intact. That distinction reportedly changed the tone of the conversation. No longer was the discussion centered on who might wear a particular piece or under what circumstances it could appear. Instead, it became a question of preservation. How could the monarchy ensure that its most emotionally significant symbols retained their historical weight? How could future generations understand what those symbols represented if their meaning gradually became diluted over time? According to several royal commentators, this is where the future role of Princess Charlotte reportedly entered the broader discussion. While Charlotte herself was not at the center of the controversy, insiders suggest that conversations about the monarchy's next generation inevitably influenced the debate. The question was no longer about the present moment alone. It was about what kind of legacy would eventually be inherited by those who would one day carry the institution forward. Supporters of Catherine's reported position viewed her stance as protective rather than confrontational. They argue that her concerns reflected a desire to safeguard continuity during a period of considerable change. In their view, preserving the significance of Diana-associated treasures was part of preserving the monarchy's broader historical narrative. Every generation inherits traditions, but every generation also bears the responsibility of deciding whether those traditions remain meaningful. As a result, royal tradition itself reportedly became one of the most frequently cited arguments during the discussions. Senior courtiers allegedly recognized that the outcome could establish expectations extending far beyond a single ceremonial issue. Decisions made today might influence similar decisions decades from now. That awareness reportedly added a new layer of seriousness to every exchange. Meanwhile, palace observers claim that some officials began realizing the dispute represented a turning point. What appeared at first to be a narrow disagreement had evolved into a conversation about long-term legacy planning. Questions about heritage, stewardship, and future leadership increasingly dominated the discussion. The focus shifted away from immediate concerns and toward the enduring identity of the institution itself. Yet as these conversations deepened, rumors began spreading beyond the individuals directly involved. What had remained confined to private meetings started generating interest throughout wider royal circles. And once speculation began moving beyond palace walls, the controversy entered an entirely new phase one, with consequences that few had anticipated. But once word of the disagreement began circulating through royal circles, the consequences reached far beyond a single meeting. When sensitive royal disagreements begin generating whispers among staff, advisors, and longtime observers, containment becomes nearly impossible. Reports suggest concern spread quickly through palace administrative circles. What was intended to remain private had reportedly become a subject of intense discussion, raising questions about unity, succession, and the stewardship of some of the monarchy's most treasured symbols. Once rumors began moving through royal networks, palace aides allegedly faced a challenge that has confronted generations of royal officials before them. The more they attempted to contain speculation, the more curiosity seemed to grow. According to insiders, conversations that were originally confined to a small group of senior figures soon became the subject of widespread discussion among advisors, administrators, and longtime palace observers. Everyone appeared to be asking the same question: how had a discussion about a historic tiara evolved into such a significant controversy? Reports suggest that efforts were quickly made to minimize public attention. Officials reportedly understood that any suggestion of internal disagreement involving Diana's legacy would attract enormous interest. Yet by this stage, speculation had already taken on a life of its own. The mystery surrounding the dispute only intensified public fascination, particularly because so few concrete details were available. Meanwhile, royal commentators allegedly began examining the broader implications of the situation. What initially appeared to be an isolated disagreement was increasingly being interpreted as a reflection of larger questions facing the monarchy. Observers wondered whether the debate signaled a deeper struggle over how royal traditions would be preserved in the years ahead. Others questioned whether it revealed emerging differences in vision among key figures within the institution. As discussion expanded, attention turned toward future ceremonial practices. If questions could arise regarding one of the most recognizable symbols connected to Diana, what might that mean for other historic traditions? Royal historians reportedly raised concerns about consistency, precedent, and the long-term management of symbolic royal assets. These concerns transformed the debate from a private matter into a conversation about the monarchy's future identity. Public fascination only added to the pressure. Diana's legacy has always occupied a unique place in public consciousness, and reports involving anything associated with her inevitably attract attention. According to royal analysts, that reality made it nearly impossible for the controversy to remain hidden for long. The emotional connection people felt toward Diana ensured that even the smallest rumor could quickly become a subject of widespread interest. Behind the scenes, senior figures allegedly worked to find a diplomatic path forward. Reports suggest there was growing recognition that the issue could not be resolved solely through administrative decisions. The emotional, historical, and symbolic dimensions of the dispute demanded careful consideration. Any outcome would need to protect not only royal traditions, but also public confidence in the institution itself. As a result, internal discussions reportedly expanded far beyond their original scope. Conversations about stewardship evolved into conversations about leadership. Debates about ceremonial customs evolved into discussions about succession, continuity, and the responsibilities awaiting future generations. What had started as a disagreement over one treasured symbol now touched some of the monarchy's most fundamental questions. And while the immediate controversy gradually became less visible, its impact continued to resonate among those closest to the institution. Because beneath the headlines, The speculation and the uncertainty, a much larger truth was beginning to emerge, one that extended far beyond a single dispute. And as the immediate controversy began to settle, a larger realization emerged about the future of the crown itself. Observers often assume royal disputes are rooted in history, but insiders suggest this conflict was always about the future. The tiara may have represented the spark, yet the underlying issue concerned who would carry forward the monarchy's most meaningful traditions. In that sense, the debate became a reflection of an institution preparing for its next chapter. As the controversy gradually unfolded, many royal watchers began arriving at the same conclusion. The arguments surrounding Diana's legacy were not really focused on the past. The past simply provided the foundation. The true debate centered on what would come next. Behind every discussion about symbolism, stewardship, and tradition was a larger conversation about the future direction of the monarchy itself. Reports suggest that succession-era planning quietly influenced much of the thinking taking place behind palace walls. While the public often focuses on ceremonies and appearances, royal institutions are constantly preparing years, sometimes decades, in advance. Decisions made today frequently shape the environment future generations will inherit. According to palace observers, that reality helped explain why emotions surrounding the dispute became so intense. Legacy preservation emerged repeatedly as one of the most important themes, not because royal figures were simply protecting historical objects, but because they were attempting to safeguard the stories attached to them. History has always been one of the monarchy's greatest strengths. It provides continuity during uncertain times. It creates a bridge between generations. And it reinforces the idea that the institution represents something larger than any individual member. Within that broader context, Catherine's role reportedly became increasingly significant. Royal commentators have often described her as a central figure in the monarchy's future. As discussions surrounding succession continue to evolve, many observers believe her influence will only grow stronger. Reports suggest that her position during the controversy reinforced perceptions that she views royal heritage as something to be protected rather than simply inherited. This is why questions of stewardship ultimately overshadowed questions of ownership. Ownership can be transferred. Stewardship requires commitment. One concerns possession, the other concerns responsibility. Throughout the debate, insiders claim that distinction became increasingly important. The conversation was no longer about who could access a particular symbol. It was about who could be trusted to preserve its meaning for future generations. Palace strategists reportedly examined the issue through a long-term lens. Their concern was not merely resolving an immediate disagreement. They were allegedly focused on stability, continuity, and public confidence in the years ahead. Every institution faces moments when it must adapt while remaining faithful to its core identity. According to observers, this controversy became one of those moments. The dispute therefore came to symbolize a changing royal landscape. A new generation is gradually moving toward greater responsibility. Expectations are shifting, roles are evolving. Yet the challenge remains the same as it has always been: how to honor the past without becoming trapped by it, and how to embrace the future without abandoning the values that made the institution endure. As the immediate tensions began to fade, that larger reality became impossible to ignore. The tiara may have sparked the conversation, but the true significance of the controversy lay elsewhere. It revealed an institution quietly preparing for the future while wrestling with the weight of its own history. Which brings us to the deeper lesson hidden beneath the headlines and speculation. Royal jewels may glitter under palace lights, but their true value lies in the stories they carry. Reports surrounding Diana's tiara have reignited a conversation about memory, duty, and inheritance. Whether every whispered detail proves accurate or not, one truth remains undeniable. Some symbols become larger than the people who temporarily hold them, and their preservation becomes a responsibility rather than a privilege. As the controversy gradually moved from rumor to reflection, many observers began looking beyond the details of the disagreement itself. The headlines focused on a tiara. The speculation focused on palace divisions. Yet beneath those conversations was a much deeper question about how institutions survive across generations. History has shown that monarchies endure not because they possess treasures, but because they attach meaning to them. Without that meaning, even the most valuable jewels become little more than artifacts. That reality helps explain why Diana's legacy continues to hold such extraordinary influence within the modern royal family. Decades after her passing, her name still carries emotional weight. Her story still inspires debate, and her legacy continues to shape how many people view the monarchy itself. Reports surrounding the tiara dispute may have centered on a single object, but they ultimately reminded the public that Diana's impact remains woven into the institution's identity. According to royal commentators, one of the clearest lessons to emerge from the controversy was the importance of stewardship. Throughout the debate, discussions repeatedly returned to the same fundamental principle. Royal symbols do not belong exclusively to the present generation. They exist as part of a chain connecting the past, the present, and the future. Each generation becomes a temporary guardian, responsible for protecting those symbols before passing them forward. Within that context, Catherine reportedly emerged as one of the most visible defenders of continuity. Supporters viewed her stance as an effort to safeguard historical meaning rather than preserve personal influence. Whether one agrees with that interpretation or not, the controversy reinforced perceptions that her role within the future monarchy continues to grow. For many observers, she represented stability during a moment of uncertainty. The debate also highlighted something equally important. Royal traditions remain inseparable from public trust. The monarchy's strength has never depended solely on titles or ceremonies. It depends on the belief that certain values endure across generations: duty, responsibility, continuity, service. When those values appear threatened, even indirectly, public interest inevitably intensifies. Future generations may one day inherit Diana's jewels, but according to many royal historians, they will inherit something even more valuable. They will inherit the stories attached to those treasures. The meaning, the memory, the expectations. And with those inheritances comes responsibility. Perhaps that is why the monarchy's most significant conflicts are rarely about power alone. Power rises and falls. Positions change. Influence shifts with time. Legacy is different. Legacy survives. It shapes decisions long after the individuals involved have disappeared from the stage. And in that sense, the reported dispute surrounding Diana's tiara may ultimately be remembered as a debate about values rather than possessions. Because in the end, crowns, titles, and treasures may change hands, but the responsibility to protect a legacy endures long after the arguments have faded into history. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.